Welcome to another Gran Turismo Sport tutorial. This tutorial will be for Group 4 cars around Brands Hatch GP, and the particular Group 4 car I'm using is the Viper. So for those of y'all who like the Megane or the 4C or whatever, this might not apply quite as much, especially with the Megane because it's front wheel drive. But I guess the general lines and all that would be relatively the same. I'm using the Viper in this one in particular because this is for the manufacturer cup, but this will work for any iteration of Group 4 cars around this track with balanced power anyway. Doesn't matter if it's manufactured as a daily race. And also another thing that's manufacturer cup specific, or I guess FIA or manufacturer either or, is the way this track does, like, leading up to your first lap. For whatever reason, PD logic, I assume, they start you going at like 73 miles an hour coming off this last turn. So aka your first lap is always going to be terrible because you're running like 8 miles an hour off your top speed once you get to the line and you can't do anything about it. So if you mess up and you know you're not going to get a good lap, just go ahead and make sure you get as good of a run into the last turn as possible. Because you're restarting means 2 laps instead of just 1 lap. So remember that for manufacturer and FIA in general. And now for the, like, could be used in any situation for Group 4's daily race or manufacturer or FIA or whatever, the actual showing the lap. For, I think, all situations, there's no tunes, but in terms of brake balance or bias or whatever they call it in this one, I haven't really messed with that too much, but I assume it's pretty much just none. I'm using none, and I think for a front engine rear wheel drive it is none more. For a front wheel drive car, I think it's rear, like more bias than rear, but I think for a rear wheel drive it's not that big a deal. So anyway, to the lap itself, as I said before, and especially for manufacturer and FIA races, you want to get as good of a run off as possible because PD logic, if you restart, your first lap is always going to be worse. So remember that. Even if that means reversing and like going backwards to get a better run up, do whatever you need, wasting 30 seconds to like go backwards or whatever on a current lap that's already going to be bad is much better than wasting a minute and 30 seconds on a lap that's already going to be bad from the very start. So anyway, for the run off this first turn into your best lap, it's okay to go in the grass a little bit, but not too much, because A, it's going to be a penalty, and B, it might throw your car off some. And for the run into lap, it's okay to go wider here, because then you carry more speed. And also different from the run up to your main lap is on the run up lap, go on the outside here so you can get a better line to the first turn. The Viper is kind of medium in terms of straightaway speeds, so if you're in a Megane, brake earlier in general. If you're in a 4C, brake later, but I'm in a Viper, so I'll just do it as this because this is the one I know best. For the Viper, brake about 131. Actually, the where it tells you to brake on this turn is pretty much accurate. Pretty much right when it tells you to brake. Maybe half a second later-ish, depending if you trail brake or not. But I'm kind of iffy on trail braking. Mostly I just brake fully and then coast a little bit instead of trail brake. And in terms of speed, is a little bit under 90 miles an hour, so that way you rotate more into this turn. This is another turn where you don't want to go in the grass too much because it's sort of a off angle a bit. It's not flat. So if you go in the grass too much, your car is going to act weird. And this is another turn like minion racing where it's kind of toe of the line. You're either going to do it perfect or you're going to mess up. Like there's no margin in between. This is pretty close to perfect. I think I could actually get about another 6 inches or so, but as close as I'm realistically going to get, not being an alien. But if you get another 7 inches over, you're going insane, and that's going to ruin your lap. So this is definitely a toe your line area. The next turn, though, isn't quite as much toe the line. In terms of braking, do it a little bit before that sign. I kind of go by the shadows here. It's kind of do it once the shadow starts becoming not as dark. Like, so pretty much just a little bit before it goes fully light. And then this is where you kind of sort of can trail brake, because this line can be in like many different ways, because more than anything it's just important to get a run off the turn more than what you do in the turn, because it's not all that long of a turn and it's slow speed. So worry more about the run off than the in. Because as you can see there, I'm not much on the apex there, but that's because I do get a better run off. Like as you can see from the ghost there, I even go that much wider on the other lap. But again, it doesn't matter how wide you go, what angle you take, it's the run off. Even though I did go wider from the previous lap, in theory that would be a better run off. But in reality it wasn't, because more than anything, for the runoff, you just want your car pointed in one direction and towards this rumble strip. Pretty much if you're doing that and you can get fully on the throttle, you're going to get a good run off no matter what the angle is. For the next turn, though, the angle is pretty important, because it's a like wide sweeping turn, the angle that you take it in to carry the most speed. So go towards this rumble strip and then go to the next rumble strip at a little above 70. This rumble strip you can hit a little bit, but this is sort of a toe of the line too, because it's a raised rumble strip. It's not as bad as some at like Willow Springs, but it is kind of raised. So if you hit it at too bad of an angle, your car is going to bounce, but if you just hit it a little bit, it's not enough of a bounce to really do anything. But if you bounce and slide here, you can't really use the full throttle, but if you don't bounce, you can pretty much just gain speed immediately. And when you do gain speed immediately, that will naturally carry your car out towards the next rumble strip. This one you can use all day, it's flat. Actually, you can go fully on it. Like, you don't necessarily want to get in the grass. It might be a penalty, but it definitely will slow your car down, but you can use all of the rumble strip. And then for the next turn, stay out wide here. Again, don't be in the grass, because if you start turning on the grass, your car gets kind of squirrely, or at least the Viper does. I assume that's one of the areas where front wheel drive would actually gain a little bit of time, because they understeer anyway. So if you get your front wheel drive oversteering into turn, it might actually help it. But in terms of a Viper, it's somewhat oversteer anyway. It's actually relatively stable for rear wheel drive, but a stable rear wheel drive is still unstable for front wheel drive. But anyway, for the next turn, this is another turn where there's quite a lot of the lines that can be taken with it, and it's more of a run out type turn than what you do in it like another turn. I brake like about 107, 108 or so, and pretty much throughout this whole turn itself, I don't actually ever get on the apex. The only time I really get on the apex is exiting the turn. For exiting the turn, make sure you're a little under 70 when you go to full throttle, because you don't want to overrun it here, because this is another toe of the line. You want to get as close to the sand as possible, but don't get in it. There is a little bit of rumble strip there, but I don't know why, but like that little tiny bit there is fine, but like that's not. They even make a part that you can run on sort of kind of look the same as the rest. Like that. That's a better view of it. That's pretty much the same color as that, but you don't want to run on that, but you can run on that. So that's even iffier there. But it is important to use all that space, because this is the highest speed section in all of the track. So you do want to get a good momentum into there. And also another thing for this section in general is, again, make sure your car is stable. You kind of want to continuously turn your car around there to keep momentum, but just don't turn it too much. It's hard to really say exactly how much to turn it, because I'm on a controller, but Just definitely not all the way, just barely enough where you can make it around there and not go in the grass. That's definitely a practice type turn. Because it's hard to really explain how to do it on a controller. But anyway, for the next turn, this turn's actually relatively easy to remember. Pretty much just start braking right after the timing zone for this one. And in terms of speed, really sort of kind of by the time you brake, you're going to be there. Just pretty much about 100 miles an hour or so once you're at the apex. This is another turn where you don't want to go in the grass too much because this is a higher speed turn, and generally the higher speeds cars are, especially rear-wheel drive, the more unstable they are because there's less reaction time at a higher speed. So make sure you're stable through here before grass. I mean, if you're an alien, maybe, but if you're an alien, you're probably not watching this anyway. But anyway, apex or not, that's still going to pretty much carry you towards that. And you do want to stay wide for this next turn. This is another sweeping type turn where the angle is more important. Because you definitely want to get the angle right here, because if you take it like that, like more of a circle instead of like a triangle, if that makes sense, like more curved instead of arced or whatever, then you're not going to be able to carry as much speed. But when you do arc it, you can carry more speed, but there's also more of a chance of going in that sand. This is sort of a toe of the line also, but it kind of depends on your arc too. A wider arc, like say you get on the apex like there instead of just like here where I am, then there's less chance of getting in the sand just because it's less degree of an arc. But it just depends on your driving style, really. This is just how I did it. And it works. Pretty much for that turn 87 or so will get you in that arc pretty well. For the next turn, this turn's kind of weird, honestly. This is a turn that I've had to practice quite a bit to get decent at, and I'm still not the best at. Because this is a turn where you want to use quite a bit of the grass for it, because even if you do get unstable, it's not that big of a straightaway coming off. But if you use the more grass you use, the more chance you're going to hit the other grass. You see what I mean when I get closer? Like if you use a lot of this grass, the angle that you're taking will put you in that grass. That grass isn't sand, but that grass will still spin your car out if you get too much in it. It's just either way, whether it's sand or not, it's still going to ruin your lap. So if you're on a really good lap, it's probably best to just take a mile an hour off and not go quite as into the grass there. Like if you hit it perfectly, you can probably go 91-ish and then a little bit more on the grass. But just either way, it's going to carry your car close to that grass. But the more on the grass you are to begin with, the less margin for error for the next grass, which you don't want to hit. And then this turn is actually another relatively easy one to remember because it's another brake right at the like timing line, like right when it makes that noise when you hit the checkpoint or whatever, brake there. And then in terms of speed is about 75 or so. This turn you can use the like rumble strip, but again don't get fully on the grass. Really about the only turns where you do use the grass is ones not leading to a big straightaway, because even if you do lose a little bit of speed, it's not that big a deal. But this is a relatively big straightaway, so don't use the grass. But this is a little bit better than that last turn in terms of grass versus road, because there's a rumble strip in the middle of it, but still don't hit that other grass either. But you can use all of that rumble strip. And then for the final turn, I kind of surprised myself with this. I guess the Viper just has good brakes, or consistent brakes, or whatever. You can actually brake way later than it says to brake here. Pretty much like 118 or so brake, which is a lot later than I realistically would have figured for this car. And you can pretty much mash the brakes too. You don't even really have to trail brake. I guess where it's a higher speed turn, and it's sort of a wide turn. It's not as wide as like that 100 mile an hour one, but it's definitely not as narrow as like one of the sweeper turns, like that one grass to the other grass that you don't want to hit. You can actually sort of kind of just mash the brakes and go in it because there's a lot of track there to use. But in terms of comparing this to your run up to the main lap to this being the main lap, on the main lap you don't want to go quite as wide because the wider line you take, you can carry more speed, but you're just using up more track in general, and it doesn't seem to help very much, really. Especially because on your best lap, you want to sweep back into the inside, so you lose less, you use less track overall. So if you start on the inside, then that's less you need to sweep to the inside, so that's just less track altogether. But anyway, once you do that, that will be your lap done. If you know it's going to be your best lap, go ahead and go on the inside. If not, just stay on the outside. And then there you go. That's the lap. I ran a 129.2. Like I said, with that turn where you do want to go to the grass, but then not hit the next grass, I can probably gain maybe enough to get a 1 through that. But otherwise, that was about as close as I'm going to get to a perfect lap. As of recording this, I'm still 4th in North America. I don't know if the world does different ones at different times than America does, but for North America, I'm still 4th. For whatever reason, it doesn't show the split times there. I don't know. I assume PD Logic. Either PD Logic or my bad internet, but I think it's PD Logic. But anyway, here are my split times, just so y'all can compare them to yours. And then, well, that's pretty much it. There's no tune on this car. It's just running as is, and as it is, the Viper is about as stable as you're going to get for rear-wheel drive. It's a little bit oversteery, but it's not bad. It's not as bad as a 4C. I assume it wouldn't be as bad as the Porsche, and those two are sort of the fastest rear-wheel drive. And then it's not at all understeery. The front-wheel drives are way more understeery as they should be. So pretty much the Viper is a good all-around car, and it's a Mopar. So you can't really go wrong there. And it's going to get beat on the straights, but it's stable enough where you can make it up into turns to where it can be competitive throughout the whole course. It'll make up on the turns. So I hope you all enjoyed this, learned something from it as usual. And as always, yeehaw!